Good morning. Um, Thank you all for joining our workshop presentation on student travel guidelines and resources. My name is Terrence Shaw. I'm the Director of Student Life and Leadership, and I'll let my co-presenters present or introduce themselves.
Hi, good morning. My name is Cindy Arce. I use she, her series pronouns, and I am the coordinator of ACE programs in student equity.
Good morning. My name is Pat Conahan, he, him pronouns, and I am the athletic director here at MiraCosta College.
Great, thank you. So, um, as we go through this presentation, we just also want to kind of acknowledge the other folks who have been instrumental in developing these student travel guidelines. So as you can see, this is the list of other folks who have contributed to the information provided throughout this training we're going to provide. And then this is just a quick overview of the agenda and the various things we're going to cover today. So we'll review the guidelines. We will talk about behavioral expectations, standards of student conduct, lodging, transportation, and meals. And we'll go over some other considerations and then talk about the care referral. And one thing I want to note about this presentation specifically, our presentation is geared towards a MiraCosta student audience, but there may be information in here that's also relevant for club advisors and district employees who are chaperoning off-campus trips with students, but there is a separate presentation specifically for district employees. Okay. So, Pat, I believe this is you.
Yep. So our purpose was really coming together because we know that a variety of student groups travel and specifically do overnight travel. And so previous to this work group, there was not a very clearly defined set of guidelines so that travel for all groups was standardized and everything with the idea of making it safe, but also an enjoyable experience for the student. So we know that student travel could occur in athletics for equity groups, for clubs, ASG. That's just a few that may travel. And we want to make sure that these guidelines support any and all student groups that could be traveling. Prior to the trip, there's a couple of things that are going to be necessary. And so the advisor or faculty or staff member will be in charge of these, but just know that this should be happening. One is that each student will need to be providing emergency contact information. And secondly, the field trip form or a field trip form for minors, if you're under 18, will need to be filled out and signed so that the college has proper documentation. Next slide.
So, as a part of any kind of official district sponsored travel for students, the standards of student conduct do apply. So, regardless if you are off campus, if you are participating in a district sponsored event, students are expected to uphold the standards of student conduct, which include all the following BP and the various APs that apply. So the standards of student conduct basically detail what the expectations are and what the various standards are. And it kind of lists the different things that could result in the student conduct process being initiated. AP 5520 just kind of goes over the full student conduct procedures. So informing students of their rights and responsibilities as a student and what the procedures look like if the student conduct procedures were to be initiated. AP 3430 is prohibition on harassment. So this just kind of details district expectations and responsibilities for prohibiting harassment on campus. So I know when we are traveling, kind of our connections with one another look really different sometimes. So I think it's really important to kind of be aware and knowledgeable about harassment to ensure those things aren't happening when students are traveling. Some other behavioral expectations that are important to be aware of is, although our APs and BPs pertain to MiraCosta, it is important that when you are traveling outside of our local area, that you are in compliance at all times with local laws as well as district policies. So this includes international travel, where certain laws might be different, or even from state to state, or different local ordinances. It's always important, and it's students' responsibility as well as their advisors to be aware of what those local laws are and to ensure our students are in compliance with those. Even if you are of age to, engage in smoking, or, of legal age to consume alcohol, drugs, alcohol, and or smoking are not permitted during official itinerary of any MiraCosta sponsored travel activity or event. What this means is, when you are traveling, there may be designated free time in which, if you are of legal age to engage in certain smoking or consumption of alcohol, you may be permitted to do that. But I would also follow the guidance that's set forth with your chaperone or advisor for that specific trip. And it's not appropriate to be under the influence during any official itinerary time. So, for instance, if you go out the night before, during free time, and student has a few drinks, but going into the next day when there's official activities and the student is either hungover or intoxicated, that would be a violation of district policy. If you have a small break and say a student wants to go off and smoke marijuana, if you return to that official activity and you smell of marijuana or you're under the influence of marijuana, that would be a violation of district policy, and students would be held accountable for that. Last piece about behavioral expectations, at least for this slide, um, the district reserves the right to end the travel at any point for a student who is in violation of the student travel guidelines and the behavioral expectations. So, if your behavior happens to be disruptive and have a negative impact to others on the trip, or there's just other behavioral concerns, you can be sent back to MiraCosta College and held accountable for your actions and behaviors. Alcohol and other drugs, I've already talked about this. Alcohol, even if you're of age, is not permissible during any district sponsored event. Um, in I kind of talked about a lot of this, but I want to skip to the third point, boundaries regarding free time. So, like I said, if you are choosing to consume alcohol or engage in drug use in your free time, it cannot be disruptive to any other student, faculty, or staff. And if you are traveling and you have concerns about someone who's using drugs or consuming alcohol, communicate those concerns to your staff or faculty chaperone from those experience. Ultimately, our goal here is to maintain safety for everyone. And the last reminder, please remember to follow the local laws.
The lodging requirements that you need to be mindful of is that now we are only allowing one student per bed. We also need to make sure that the employees and the students sleep in separate rooms. And all participants need to make sure that they sleep in a room that is able to be locked. And overnight rooms for authorized participants are allowed only. Some exceptions could be made for non-participants to be in the room, but only if they receive approval by a dean and director, AVP, or a VP For example, minors or specific medical accommodations. And some best practices for roommate selection. You can see the points that we have on the screen. You want to make sure that you have affirmative consent on roommate selection. We do not do gender requirements for room selection or we do not make any assumptions. The district does reserve the right to assign rooms as needed. And if you have any requests due to health or medical or cultural considerations, there is a protocol that can be followed for us to make sure that we are respecting the considerations that we need to keep in mind. So travelers and those planning the travel will need to avoid assuming the gender identity and sexual orientation of others. While in some cases, students will have the opportunity to select their roommate or share preferences, as I noted, we do reserve the right to assign rooms if needed. And for the last bullet point, if due to health, if due to medical conditions, cultural reasons, you need to request a private room accommodation, then you need to make sure you connect directly and very quickly with the employee that's leading the planning for the travel to make sure that requesting a private room it's possible, and also making sure that everything that needs to be done on the employee's end can be done in a timely manner. Keep in mind that requesting a private room will definitely impact the travel budget. So just keep in mind that as much as the college will try to accommodate all requests, the budget might not always be able to do so. And for lodging accommodation needs, I covered
Okay.
That already.
Okay.
Okay, transportation. So MiraCosta has a fleet of vehicles that most likely will be used for the majority of trips. What is important to know here is that the pickup and drop-off site should be at a campus. So either the Oceanside campus, the San Elijo campus, or the CLC. When transportation is offered, the expectation is that all students will come to that site and then leave from there. It would be too much to have individual pickups and so forth. What we would tell students is please plan to arrive early. For these trips. They're important and they're going to bring a lot of value into your college experience. And we would hate for you to miss the van or the bus if there's a bus chartered because you didn't get there early. Next slide. Students can choose to drive themselves. Again, this is something that you will need to discuss first with the person that's leading the trip. And it's important to know that you will not be reimbursed for gas or mileage or wear and tear on your car. Let's see what else. Participants may only drive other participants if they are an approved driver through the district. So there is a process through it for this. It's going to take a number of weeks. And so if this is something that is important to you for some reason that you need to drive yourself and perhaps another participant, you will need to start that process early, no later than 2 weeks before the date of the trip, but it would be suggested that you start it even before that, because you will likely need to become first a volunteer and then an approved driver through the district. Next slide. And so for all overnight trips, there should be meal money provided. There are two different systems that the staff member or the planners could choose. For field trips, you'll see that it's a total of $40 for 3 meals. For overnight travel, it is suggested that you use the field trip, the IRS per diem rates, which is typically used also for staff members when they take travel. And that amount of money varies depending on what city you're going to And there's equations that include taking money away for travel days, and if the conference or workshop provides meals, all of that can be taken care of and will be explained to you by the staff member or an administrative assistant involved in the travel. Next slide.
Okay. So I'm going to review some additional travel considerations, starting with health considerations. So it's really important when you are traveling outside of the area, particularly for overnights, or if you're taking flights, or if you're taking charter buses or Greyhound buses or something like that, to think ahead and plan for a potential medical need. So you want to ensure you have a healthy supply of medications if you are taking medications. You want to keep your medications on your person. So if you're traveling by flight and you're checking a bag, or say you're taking a charter bus, and you're putting your luggage underneath the bus, you want to make sure your medications that you need ready access to are not in your luggage. So if you need to carry like a small backpack or a fanny pack or a purse or a backpack, you want to make sure you keep your luggage or your medications close to you when possible. And you should always kind of check kind of where your supplies are, just in case you may not have access to or ready access to a pharmacy to refill medication. So this is really important when we talk about how do we prepare for trips. Always want to be thinking through these things weeks in advance if you know you are planning to travel. The other thing is, if you are currently or actively in some form of like counseling or psychological support or mental health counseling or seeing a therapist, you want to check with your therapist in advance of traveling outside of the state of California. For the most part, the majority of therapists are not able to see clients who are outside of the state. That definitely goes for phone therapy sessions and video kind of Zoom sessions with a therapist. California has very strict guidelines and regulations in terms of like how therapists can consult and meet with clients. And there's very, very limited chances that can happen when a student is traveling outside of the state. So you always want to kind of be aware with that and kind of game plan with your therapist in advance of travel. And for most situations, particularly for like international trips, there is kind of work being done on the back end to make sure there's local support that's available for students when traveling abroad. But these are the things you might want to always kind of keep in mind.
And a couple other considerations to keep in mind is, if you are traveling, are there any legal considerations that might need to be factored into your planning? And I do want to note that this is not intended to serve as legal advice, and it is not a substitute for obtaining legal advice from a qualified attorney. But if you're a student that's traveling and you happen to be formerly incarcerated and or undocumented, remember that as a student, you are allowed to opt out based on risks of any travel that the school's putting together. If the person that is in charge of the planning has not shared with you, it could be a good idea to ask if the trip will be crossing immigration checkpoints and if it will be leaving the San Diego County. If you happen to be system impacted or formerly incarcerated, please consider that traveling to other counties or states, if you happen to have an active warrant, that's something that you might want to make sure that you're allowed to do. Make sure that certain mediums of transportations, as an example, sometimes traveling in certain vans or going through specific roads or highways can result in you feeling triggered. So remember that if you are in that situation, if you are traveling and you find yourself reliving something that is causing you to feel anxious or triggered, know that you are free and that you can ask at any point for the driver to please pull over to take a break. It's something to consider for you to also talk to a mental health counselor before going on your trip. We do have mental health counseling offered by the college, or if there is someone that you're already talking to prior to your trip, it is important for you to check in with them to be prepared. And in some cases, parole or probation officers do need to approve travel passes about 30 days in advance. And they do usually need to know what vehicle you will be traveling in. If you're going on a flight, they will need some flight details, hotel information, etc. And so you want to make sure you connect as quickly as you find out that you're going on a trip with the planner so that you can get all the details as soon as possible. And lastly, just keep in mind as I mentioned earlier, the checkpoints. So in this next slide, there is a list off of the Immigrants Rising website that shows the checkpoints here that are most common to go through in Southern California. And some other considerations: if you are undocumented or a DACA recipient, please consider that there are different ways that we could be traveling. As I mentioned, it could be through a bus, it could be through a school vehicle, it could be a flight. So be mindful and ask yourself, is this a travel that is going to go through checkpoints? If this is going to be a school travel that is happening through a domestic flight or ground transportation, such as public buses or train or ground transportation, you want to make sure that you ask what kind of transportation are we taking to the trip, and what will be needed of me? What kind of documentation will you need to have in place to present if necessary? And it's really important for you to have and develop a safety plan. Anyone and everyone should have a safety plan in general, but specifically for our undocumented community, you want to make sure that in the case that you find yourself in a situation where you are detained by an immigration officer, have a safety plan in place so that you know what steps you can take and what steps those that are going to be in your support system will also be needing to take. And so some quick tips about this is that while the police can ask you about your immigration status, under the Fifth Amendment, you do have the right to remain silent, and you do not have to answer questions about where you were born, about whether or not you are a U.S. citizen, or how you entered the country. Do not lie about your immigration status. Do not lie about your citizenship status. Do not provide fake documents, and do not sign any paperwork before you talk to an attorney. It is also not recommended for an individual to fly with an AB60 license. We have had several students that have traveled and taken flights with an AB60 license, but it is not something that is recommended. This is a driver's license that is available for undocumented individuals in California. The reason it's not recommended is because TSA has been very inconsistent regarding the acceptance of AB60 licenses. TSA can potentially use this license as a basis to stop someone, then leading to questioning them and ultimately referring them to ICE. When we're using ground transportation for a trip, both the drivers and the passengers have the right to remain silent. So if the vehicle is going through a checkpoint and you're a passenger, you are allowed to ask the authorities if you are free to leave. And in that situation, just know that you are, if the authorities say that you are free to leave, you can just leave silently. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, developing a safety plan. In the next slide, you will see that I have some contact information for two folks at the college. One is Brian Astorga from the Uprise program. The Uprise program offers free immigration legal consultations with an immigration attorney at both the Community Learning Center and at the Credit Campus on Barnard Drive, in addition to offering them on Zoom. If you are a student, faculty, or staff member, you can access these immigration services for free. And coming up with an emergency plan is part of the services that they offer. So if you are undocumented and are thinking that you want to participate in a travel and you want to be prepared for this travel, we highly recommend that you reach out to Bring In so that you can set up an immigration legal consultation and have the information that you need prior to your trip. And Ashley Gerdo is the specialist for our Transition Scholars Program. So if you are system impacted or formerly incarcerated and would like to be prepared and ready for a trip that you're going on that is not part of Transition Scholars, make sure that you connect with Ashley so that you can have information that will be helpful regarding your trip.
Great, thank you. So now I want to kind of review some additional resources, specifically talking about the care referral in that process. So I'm following this presentation, and if you look at the additional resources, these slides are made available, so you can directly click on the hyperlinks we have in the presentation. But care referrals can be submitted on behalf of any student. So if you have concerns for yourself or another student along your trip, you can always submit a care referral for yourself or on their behalf. The importance about the care referral is to make sure we're being specific in describing the behaviors that we observe that are of concern. And it's always helpful to talk about the specific impact to you and others when submitting that care referral. So ultimately, our goal with care referrals is to connect students with the appropriate support and resources they need to ensure they can be successful at MiraCosta College. So there are different types of or natures of the various care referral reports. The most common one students will likely use are student care concern. So these get routed through different teams, and you can kind of see the various folks who kind of support students for different care referral types. So if you have concern about the well-being of another student or yourself, that gets routed to our care team, health services team, and also the student conduct team. As it pertains to travel, some of these likely will not be necessary to consider, but student conduct and disruption is something that we may encounter or see when students are traveling. Discrimination complaints, Title IX complaints. And if you are experiencing any type of threatening behavior, you definitely want to connect directly with your staff, chaperones, or district employee who's leading or supporting your trip if there's an immediate threat of physical harm to you or another student. And this is just to kind of put some faces to kind of those teams. So who responds to care referrals? These are the folks who kind of make up the care referral or the care team at MiraCosta College. So these are the folks who will likely be doing the follow-up or connecting with the student once a care referral kind of comes in. And as you can see, we represent a variety of different offices and services across campus. So I hope that helps students feel reassured that their needs will be met when a care referral is submitted. If you're on a trip and you experience some concerns as it pertains to Title IX, which happens to be sex and gender-based harassment and discrimination primarily, but if you are also experiencing discrimination based on any of your identities, it might be necessary to submit a Title IX complaint or a referral. And basically what our goal is to connect students with the appropriate support resources they need. And if there are specific behaviors that are recurring, that are negatively impacting your experience, to engage and participate in these programs and events, we want to also address those behaviors. With the Title IX team, we primarily support students in seeking accommodations. Those accommodations can be in the form of, academic support and connecting with faculty if there's direct impact to the classroom, but it also entails us making sure we're providing kind of safe spaces for students to like engage in educational opportunities. So if there's behaviors that need to be addressed, or you're concerned about the behaviors of another student who you are in contact with, we will work with you to address that. As you can see on the left, I'm Haley Schwarzkopf. She's the Director of Labor Relations and Title IX Coordinator for the entire district. So if you are traveling on a district-sponsored trip, or you have any concerns or complaint that involves a district employee, Haley is the person who's going to be taking the lead on addressing like those concerns. But the deputy Title IX coordinators, Mitra, myself, and Jared, we're primarily working with student on student concerns. So you'll likely be connecting with one of the three of us. And that immediately kind of concludes like the information for our presentation. And as we're doing a live recording, there isn't any questions that could be asked, but I'm wondering, Pat and Cindy, from the previous session that we did, were there any questions that came up that maybe we can like offer just as like some additional kind of tidbits or considerations?
I can't think of any exact questions, but I do remember a lot of conversation after our presentation revolving around starting your planning process early. So a lot of the questions were, that's going to be a question, or you're going to need to connect with the advisor or faculty that's running the trip, but do it early so that that faculty member or that staff member has time to go get the answer. They may not always have it. They may have to go to the dean. They may also need time to just sort out if their budget can cover it. But what I would encourage students to do is know that if you do have special needs of any sort, please bring those to the planning group as early as possible so that they can do what they can do to accommodate and make it an incredible experience.
Yes.
I don't think I have any questions that I can remember at the moment, but just to reiterate what Pat said about going to the trip planner as soon as possible, because there is a lot that happens behind the scenes that students are not aware of, that when we have to put a travel together, there are a lot of processes that need to be followed for us on our end. And so the sooner that you are able to inform about what needs you have that need to be addressed, the better, because one, it's not guaranteed we'll always be able to accommodate, but if we are, the earlier you tell us, the better, so that we can tell you whether or not that's something we're going to be able to accomplish.
Yeah. And just another thing that I want to kind of reiterate and add is, district sponsored events and, official club events do require like some form of advisor to be present. So students are just not permitted to do official events off campus or on campus without the support and presence of an advisor. And it doesn't have to necessarily be your specific club advisor. Say your club advisor is not available to participate or attend. You all as student leaders should be working with your advisor to identify someone else who can support your trip or excursion. Because the last thing we want to see happen is, students put a lot of energy and time into planning a trip or an event, and there's a lot of excitement. and at the last minute, like it can't happen because the staff support isn't there, or we didn't get this paperwork we needed done in time. Particularly, if cash is involved, meals are going to be provided. We can't provide cash directly to students. That cash needs to be given to like the person chaperoning the trip to distribute. So that can have an impact on meals. So we definitely want to make sure we have those things kind of in order, and we're going to continue to provide some accurate and transparent resources and information along with this presentation. But if questions do come up, you saw the contact for myself, Pat, and Cindy for student clubs. You can also contact JD Banks, who is the new interim student services specialist in student life and leadership, or you can contact student life and leadership directly if you have additional questions. With that, I think that kind of concludes this presentation from us. We really appreciate all of your attentiveness and listening to us as we share, because we truly want to make sure you all can travel safely and enjoy yourselves on behalf of MiraCosta. So thank you for listening, and yeah, enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.